Hey Jeannie, I was thinking.
What, Bruce?
I was thinking that the Energy Nerd Show is like an online interactive power plant map.
How so?
Well, it's nerdy and it's got information about energy stuff, and it's really mainly for energy nerds.
Well, I bet that Dr. Erin Camp from Synapse can tell us more about one of those things.
She brought a map.
Good morning, Erin.
Good morning, Bruce and Jeannie. I brought a map to talk about today. I'm going to share my screen. So I made this map with the help of my colleague, Pat Knight at Synapse, who has previously been on the Energy Nerd Show several times, I believe. And together we did this map, which is an updated version of a previous map that was originally hosted on Google Earth. And so this time around, when we updated the map this year, we decided to make the map a little bit more fun and interactive and more easily accessible to the folks who like to use Synapse's power plant map. So what we did was we converted the Google Earth power plant map into an Arcgis online dashboard, which is what you can see here. So when you go to Synapse's website and click the interactive power plant map link, it'll take you to this external link on Arcgis online. And when you see the map that comes up, you can actually click and drag around just like what you could previously do on Google Earth. You can also zoom in and out, click on any of the dots that you see here. And each of the dots is color-coded based on the type of fuel that the power plant uses. And so we've got black dots mean coal plants, pink is biomass, red is geothermal, blue is hydro, and so on. And also the size of the dot is scaled to the size of the power plant in megawatts. So the bigger the dot, the larger the power plant capacity. And as you can see here, when you click on any of the dots, it'll tell you more about the power plant itself. So we've got the power plant name, the primary and secondary fuel type, the ORSPL code, which is just the unique identifier for the power plant, when it was first operating, the utility that owns the plant, and then some historical plant characteristics and plant emissions if the power plant is fueled by fossil fuels. And so then you can click out of the box there. And another cool feature of the power plant map is that you can filter by fuel type. So if you go up to the upper left-hand corner, you can click here. And let's say you just wanted to focus on where are the coal plants. And then it will do that. Let's zoom out. And so now we can see where all the power plants that are primarily fueled by coal are located. As you can see, they tend to be located most prevalently on the East Coast. Now I'm curious about where are the solar plants? I'm going to uncheck coal. So now we can see where all the solar installations are all across the US. And interestingly, the solar plants tend to fall within state boundaries. You can see the states that have the strongest solar policies, like Massachusetts and North Carolina here. There's also some high concentrations in New Jersey and over here in California.
You know, Erin, I'm going to stop you because there's also one up in the middle. Is that Minnesota? Somewhere up there. Must have an amazing policy. What's going on?
Yeah, I actually am not familiar with Minnesota's solar policy, but yeah, you're right that there is a high concentration there in southern Minnesota. But it's interesting that you can sort of see where the high concentrations are by state, and then you could take that information and go and research what does Minnesota's solar policy look like compared to, say, North Dakota's, which has almost no yellow dots there.
Right.
So you can use this tool as a visual indicator of what states might have good solar policies. The story here in the map is that even in places where the solar energy isn't as strong, like in Minnesota and Massachusetts, you can still have plenty of solar installs with good policies.
An interesting research project might be to compare like Minnesota to Wisconsin, because they've got to be pretty similar in a lot of ways, right? But clearly something else is happening in Minnesota.
Yep, exactly. So, and when you're done looking at a specific fuel type, you can say reset, and you'll see all the power plants again. And one other interesting update this year that Pat and I did is we included power plants in Puerto Rico. This is the first year that we're including Puerto Rico in the power plant map. And I'll add that most of the data here is still pretty new, and they're still working through some of the kinks in the data back at EIA. So the data there is not completely finished, but we're excited to finally have some data to show in Puerto Rico.
That's great. And since you're calling it power plant map and you were showing solar, I'm guessing that's just utility scale solar that shows up on the map?
Yes, I believe so. And this is all data from EIA and EPA.
Well, and you may be an ArcGIS pro, but if I don't use ArcGIS, would I be daunted by fooling around and exploring this map?
I don't think so. You don't have to download any software to use the map. It's simply just clicking on a link on Synapse's website, and it's all pretty straightforward. You can just click around and use your mouse and click on different power plants and just what I showed you with the filtering. It's all pretty straightforward and free.
You know, I have to say it's really beautiful. Like it's just really like as a thing to look at. It's gorgeous, and of course, you know, it loaded with information.
Yeah, it's very aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, and useful. I mean, you can just imagine activists getting all, you know, packed up with their vans to go to all these big black dots.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to highlight a few more things in my overview. So if you zoom into one of the coal plants in Georgia, I'm going to zoom into one that I know pretty well. You can see that the capacity factor over time is decreasing. From 2015 to 2020, the capacity factor, which is just the amount of time that the power plant is running per year, is going down significantly. And if you go back to 2010, this power plant had over 70% capacity factor. So you can see that there's a general trend of reducing the operation of this coal plant, which is quite interesting, I think.
18% capacity factor is really a peaker. And that is not a baseload power plant.
Exactly. We tend to think of coal plants as being baseload, but at least for this one in particular, it's becoming less so of a baseload resource. And then one other thing I wanted to show is over here in Washington State, which has a lot of hydroelectric power plants. So if you zoom in to the Columbia River, you can see in the map that there's the river, and here are all the hydro plants that live on the river. So it's pretty cool that you can see the natural features and the power plants together.
Wow. What's that dam at the huge blue dot?
This is the largest power plant in the US. Grand Coulee.
Cooley Dam.
6.8 gigawatts.
Oh, wow.
So another cool thing about this power plant map is that you can change the base map. So right now we're looking at a plain light gray canvas. And if you wanted to look at satellite imagery, you could do that.
Oh, wow.
And I believe that one of the earliest versions of the Synapse power plant map, which was hosted on Google Earth Maps, had a pretty interesting story in that we were able to see in Google Earth satellite imagery a coal plant that was dumping its waste into the river. And that information was able to be given to environmental advocates to advocate for the coal plant to stop doing that. So that's a pretty fun fact. So you can zoom in on some of the coal plants that might be on rivers and see what's going on in terms of their coal ash ponds.
That's pretty great that these images exist and are free.
Yeah. So there you go. I believe there's the ponds right there of the coal-based.
We can link to the blog post about that story of that particular plant that was illegally discharging into the river. And I was talking recently with some people from Climate Trace, which is a kind of coalition project to use global satellite imaging to specifically put together a database of power plants So, at least when it's not cloudy, you can see a lot about what's going on at power plants from the satellite images, which have been getting better and better all the time. The other thing about rivers is, the hydro plants are obviously on rivers, but it's kind of interesting how most of the coal plants seem to be on rivers too. You can just look at the coal and notice, where big rivers through the Midwest and, the Mississippi going down to New Orleans and it's like, oh yeah, those are the coal plants.
Yeah, isn't that because they need water to cool their power plant?
Water cooling for sure.
This is another fun one. Looks like colored pencils.
Great.
So lots of different options.
Can you show us just the solar again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you can also look at solar and other resources if you wanted to. Like if you want to look at where's the solar and wind combined, you could do that too, which I find interesting. Like, where are the renewables together? Another fun one that I like to show off is geothermal, just because that's what I studied. Geothermal is on the West Coast. And that's because the geothermal resource is best on the West Coast. So I like to give people an analogy that the best geothermal resource is near where you have the most earthquakes and the most volcanoes, because that's where the Earth's tectonics is most active. And so there's a plate boundary just west of the west coast of the US. And so that's what causes there to be more heat closer to the Earth's crust.
I was going to say cool, but I mean hot.
Good one, Jeannie. And if you want to see nuclear.
Wow.
Remember we went to that one on our honeymoon, Jeannie.
Oh. Yeah. Glen Rose, Texas, down by Dallas. Yeah.
Nuclear plants are so romantic.
Oh boy, you know it.
Another cool feature of the power plant map is this handy search tool right here. So if you click it, you can say, I want to know where the, let's see, Dan Scammer plant is. Dan Scammer generating station. There we go. So it'll take me right to the Dan Scammer plant in New York. It is natural gas. And here's all the information about Dan Scammer. So if I don't know exactly where it is, this is a really neat tool for typing in the name of it, and then the map will just go right to it with a zoom. So the power plant map is pretty useful for a lot of different applications. I can envision it being useful for anyone who's doing research on distribution of power plants across the US. Where do different types of resources tend to be located? Where is there greater potential for different resources? As you saw when you click on one of the power plant dots, you can see a ton of data that we collected for that power plant from EPA and EIA. So if someone wants to know what the emissions of a power plant is, or how much that power plant is generating, or recently generated in recent years, it's really easy to go and check out the power plant map instead of having to go to EIA or EPA and download their data set and then go hunting for the power plant. You can also see with the satellite imagery where natural features are relating to power plants, to see what the impact of power plants are on the environment. The list can go on. There's a lot of different ways that you can use it.
I think the thing that really sets this one apart, or makes it particularly useful, is it's just so accessible, right? It's just it's free, it's straightforward to use. Click, and then you're there looking at your state or region or type of power plants that you're interested in. At Synapse, we do like 100 and something projects a year. One use is when you're hired to do a new project, you just kind of it's going to take a few minutes. Take a breath and get an aerial view of what's going on in the state or service territory, and where are the power plants located and what's nearby, and it's just in some ways a good context or reminder. Maybe you already know a lot of what's going on there, but you might not realize a new plant has been built or something's retired. A good map can really help you figure out where you are and what to do next.
I agree. And in this conversation, you're reminding me that there's so many other things that we can add to this map. And Pat and I have a laundry list of ideas that we'd like to add to future iterations of this map, like adding in a filter by construction year, adding in a filter by state, by owner, by utility owner. Those sorts of things could be really useful. And then maybe even adding in transmission lines.
Nerd Show audience out there, if you're watching this show and you have a wish list for what you want to see in future versions of this map, let us know. Thanks for sharing the map, Erin.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.